Awakening in the damp cells of the ludus stir in the pre-dawn chill, your thin woolen blanket clinging to your skin like a reluctant shadow. The air in the ludus is thick with the scent of damp stone and stale sweat, a familiar musk that seeps into your dreams and lingers long after you wake. It's the year 72 BCE, in the heart of Rome's sprawling gladiatorial school, the Ludus Magnus, though yours is one of the lesser ones, tucked against the Esquiline hill, where the city's refuse heaps remind you daily of your place in its underbelly. As a servus gladiatorius, a servant bound to the fighters who will one day spill blood for the crowd's roar. Your life unfolds in these dim corridors where the walls whisper of forgotten Thracians and Gauls, their echoes muffled by the constant drip of water from cracked ceilings. The ludus is a fortress of routine, built not for glory but for the grim machinery of spectacle. Stone floors, worn smooth by countless bare feet, press cold against your palms as you push yourself up from the straw pallet shared with 3 others, fellow slaves whose names you murmur only in the dead of night. Yours is Lucius, once a free farmer from the Sabine hills, sold into this after a bad harvest and a creditor's whim. But names mean little here. You're simply the boy to the lanista, the school's harsh overseer, a former gladiator with scars like twisted vines across his arms. The roosters haven't crowed yet, but the distant clank of iron gates signals the start. You rub your eyes, gritty from yesterday's dust, and feel the ache in your shoulders from hauling amphorae of olive oil the evening before. Rising slowly, you shuffle to the narrow slit of a window, high enough to tease but not grant a view of the outside world. Through it, the first gray light filters in, carrying the faint temps of the Tiber's mud and the acrid smoke from the Subura's bakeries. Rome awakens in layers, the patricians in their villas with silk sheets and spiced wine, the merchants haggling over amphorae of garum fish sauce, and down here, you folding your blanket with mechanical precision. The straw crackles softly underfoot, releasing a musty earthiness that grounds you in this subterranean world. No birdsong reaches you, only the low rumble of snores from the gladiators' cells nearby, those hulking forms chained to their bunks, their breaths heavy with the barley-heavy meals that bulk their frames. Your first task, as always, is to tend the lamps. You light the tallow wicks with a flint striker, the flame sputtering to life in the clay holders bolted to the walls. The oil is cheap, rancid stuff from pressed olives gone sour, and it smokes lazily, filling the air with a greasy haze that stings your eyes. But it's better than darkness. In the ludus, shadows breed suspicion, and a forgotten lamp could mean the strap across your back. You move quietly, your tunica, rough tunic of undyed wool, hem-frayed from constant scrubbing, brushing against your calves. The fabric itches against the faint scars on your arms, reminders of a lanista's impatience when a gladiator's armor wasn't buffed to a shine. As the lamps cast their warm, flickering glow, you hear the first stirrings from the doctor's quarters. The trainer, a wiry Greek with a voice like grinding gravel, barking orders to his underlings. The gladiators will rise soon, their days a cycle of strength-building drudgery, designed to forge men into weapons. But you, the servant, are the invisible thread holding it together. No crowds cheer your name, no wreaths of laurel crowned your brow. Instead, it's the quiet labor, The endless polishing, the bandaging, the fetching, and oh, how it sucks the way the cold seeps into your bones, making your fingers stiff and clumsy. Or how the gladiator's tempers flare like struck flint over a misplaced towel. You pad down the corridor, the stone cool and unyielding beneath your calloused feet. The ludus is a labyrinth, cells for the novici, the raw recruits, fresh from the slave markets. Larger barracks for the veterans, their walls etched with crude tallies of victories. And the armory, a vault of oiled leather and iron that smells of rust and lanolin. Your charge today is Marcus, a retiarius net fighter from Hispania, his lithe frame scarred from a dozen bouts. He's surly in the mornings, his dark eyes flashing like a cornered wolf, and you've learned to approach with deference, head bowed, words soft. Dominus, you'll murmur, offering the clay bowl of warmed water for his ablutions. But first, the fires. In the communal hearth, you kneel to coax embers from the night's ashes, your knees protesting against the gritty floor. The wood is scrub oak, splintery and damp, and it smokes before catching, the heat blooming slowly against your face. You feed it twigs, then larger branches. The crackle, a soothing rhythm that almost drowns the distant moans from the infirmary wounds festering, bones knitting poorly under the chirurgeon's rough hands. The smell of charring resin mixes with the ever-present brine of sweat-soaked linens, a bouquet of endurance. As the flames steady, you fill a cauldron with water from the cistern, the iron handle biting into your palms, heavy with the weight of what it carries, not just liquid, but the promise of the day's first wash. The gladiator's ritual to shake off the night's doubts. Hours like this stretch into eternity. You've seen gladiators rise to fame. Spartacus, himself trained in a ludus not far from here. His rebellion a whisper among the slaves, but for you, it's the small tyrannies that wear the spirit thin. The way a fighter might kick over a bucket in frustration, forcing you to mop the spill by torchlight. Or how the lanista tallies your worth in sestresses, bartering you like a mule if a richer patron demands. The cold mornings amplify it all. The fog that rolls in from the river, condensing on your skin like a perpetual dew, chilling the marrow. Your breath clouds before you, a fleeting ghost in the lamplight, and you wonder, not for the first time, if the free men above feel this bone-deep weariness. As the hearth warms, you portion out the first herbs, bay leaves and barley for the porridge, their dry husks crumbling under your fingers, releasing a faint, nutty aroma that teases hunger you dare not indulge. The gladiators eat the doctored diet, high in grains, to build fat under muscle, a layer against the arena's blades. Yours is the leavings, crusts hardened like leather. You stir the pot with a wooden spoon worn smooth, the steam rising in lazy curls, carrying the bland comfort of sustenance. It's monotonous, this stirring, the wooden handle slick in your grip, the bubbles popping softly like distant applause. But in its rhythm, there's a strange solace, the world reduced to heat and motion. The ludus, a cocoon of controlled chaos. Footsteps echo, now heavier, approaching. Marcus stirs in his cell, the chains rattling like a warning. You straighten, wiping your hands on your tunic, the wool absorbing the damp. The door creaks open, and there he is, broad-shouldered, his hair matted from sleep, eyes bleary but sharp. Water, he grunts, voice thick with the accent of distant hills. You pour it carefully, the liquid sloshing in the bowl, warm from the hearth's proximity. He splashes his face, droplets tracing paths down his neck, and you stand ready with the linen cloth. As he dries, his gaze flicks to you, yet probing, as if weighing whether you're worth the effort of complaint. The morning unfolds in this vein. You assist his donning of the sublegoculum, the linen loincloth, tied with practiced knots, its fabric stiff from prior washes in lye and urina, Roman secret for whitening, though it leaves your hands raw. Then the sandals, leather straps, crisscrossing calves, corded with muscle, each buckle a tiny conquest over discomfort. All the while, the ludus hums to life, other servants shuffling like shadows, the clatter of wooden training swords being stacked, the low murmur of the doctor assigning pairs for the vitus, the light cane that stings without scarring. A tool for correction, you follow Marcus to the palestra, the open training yard where sand, imported from North Africa, shifts underfoot like a living thing. The air here is fresher, laced with the green bite of crushed herbs from the medic's garden, but it carries the undernote of old blood baked into the earth. As he begins his stretches arms, circling slowly, joints popping like dry twigs, you fetch the strigil, the curved bronze scraper for later oiling. It's heavy in your hand, its edge dulled from use, and you polish it absently, the metal warming under friction. But as the first rays of sun crest the walls, gilding the yard in pale gold, a shadow falls across your thoughts. Marcus pauses, his breath steadying, and glances toward the horizon, where the Colosseum's arches loom, in the distance a promise of glory for him, oblivion for you. The lanista appears then, whip coiled at his belt, his face a map of old fractures. Move, vermin, he snaps at a dawdling servant nearby, the crack of leather on flesh echoing like a punctuation. You flinch inwardly, knowing your turn could come for the slightest lapse. And as Marcus resumes his forms, the net uncoiling in his grip like a serpent, you wonder, in this web of service and survival, what small rebellion might the day yet demand of you? The endless fetching of dawn water. You stand at the edge of the palestra, the morning sun now a faint warmth against your skin, though it does little to chase the chill from your bones. The sand beneath your feet, coarse and gritty, shifts with each step, a reminder of the endless tasks that anchor your days in the ludus. Marcus, the retiarius, has begun his drills, his net swinging in lazy arcs, catching the light like a fisherman's trap glinting on some distant sea. His movements are precise, honed by months of repetition, but your work is far from over. The lanista's voice still lingers in the air, sharp as the crack of his whip. And now your next task calls, fetching the dawn water, a labor as relentless as the tides. The ludus depends on water rivers of it, it seems, to wash the sweat from the gladiators' bodies, to dilute the bloodstains on their training gear, to fill the cauldrons for their meals and the basins for their ablutions. The cistern lies at the far end of the compound, a squat stone structure fed by an aqueduct that hums with the distant pulse of Rome's ingenuity. You hoist the yoke across your shoulders, its wooden curve biting into the tender spots where yesterday's loads left bruises. Two clay amphorae, chipped but sturdy, hang from ropes at either end, their weight empty but promising to grow punishingly heavy. The path to the cistern winds past the armory, where the tang of iron and leather mixes, with the faint rot of discarded bandages, and through the herb garden, where mint and thyme release their sharp green scents underfoot. The air is cool, heavy, with the dew that clings to the stone walls, and your breath catches as you pass the infirmary. A low moan escapes through the barred window, the voice of a murmello who took a wooden sword too hard to the ribs yesterday. You keep moving, eyes fixed on the path, the packed earth slick from last night's rain. The city, beyond the ludus, is waking now. You hear the faint creak of cartwheels and the shouts of vendors from the Sabura, their voices carrying over the walls like a song from another life. But here, in this enclosed world, your focus narrows to the rhythm of your steps, the sway of the amphitheater, the dull ache spreading from your shoulders to your spine. At the cistern, you set the yoke down, the wood thudding softly against the ground. The water's surface ripples under the faint breeze, reflecting the pale sky in fractured shards. You dip the first amphora, the clay cool against your palms, and watch it fill with a slow gurgle, bubbles rising like tiny prayers. The water is cold, drawn from the aqueduct's deep channels, and it splashes against your tunic, soaking through to your skin. You grit your teeth, the damp fabric clinging like a second skin, and fill the second vessel. Lifting the yoke again, now heavy with the sloshing weight, you feel the strain pull at your muscles, a familiar burn that you've learned to endure. The return journey is slower, deliberate, each step calculated to keep the water from spilling loss that would earn you a lash, or worse, a day without your meager ration of bread. The ludus is stirring fully now. Other servants move like ghosts in the morning light, their faces drawn, their hands busy with brooms or baskets of soiled linens. You pass a boy no older than 12, his eyes hollow as he drags a sack of barley toward the kitchen. You nod, a silent acknowledgement of shared burdens, but there's no time for words. The gladiators are gathering in the palestra, their voices, a low rumble of curses and laughter, the clatter of wooden shields punctuating their drills. Marcus is there, his net now coiled at his feet, his trident propped against a post as he spars with a secutor, their movements a dance of controlled violence. The doctor circles them, his Vetus tapping the ground, his eyes missing nothing. You deliver the water to the kitchen first, where the cook, grizzled Campanian woman named Flavia, grunts her approval. Her hands, gnarled from years of kneading dough, are already dusted with flour, and the air smells of toasted barley and the faint sourness of yeast. "Careful, Lucius," she mutters, not unkindly, as you pour the water into the waiting cauldron. Spill it, wiping your brow, the sweat mingling with the damp of the water on your skin. The kitchen is a haven of sorts, warmer than the cells, the hearth's glow casting flickering shadows across the blackened walls. But there's no lingering. Another trip to the cistern awaits, this time for the bathhouse, where the gladiators will wash after their morning drills. The bathhouse is a cavernous space, its tiled floors slick with condensation, the air heavy with the mineral temps of heated water. You pour the amphorae into the stone basins, the splash echoing in the vaulted chamber. The tiles are chipped, their once bright mosaics of Neptune and nymphs faded to ghostly outlines, but they still hold the day's heat, a small mercy for your bare feet. You pause just for a moment to press your hand against the warm stone, letting the sensation ease the ache in your fingers. It's a fleeting indulgence. The lanista's shadow looms, even here, his rules enforced by the ever-present threat of his whip. As you return to the cistern for the third trip, the sun climbs higher, its light cutting through the haze to paint the ludus in shades of gold and dust. The yoke feels heavier now, the ropes chafing against your palms, but you move with the dogged rhythm of survival. The other servants are at their tasks. One sweeps the palestra's sand, another hauls a basket of soiled bandages to the laundry vats. You catch the eye of Gaius, a wiry Thracian who tends the armory, his hands perpetually stained with oil and rust. He offers a grim smile, his teeth crooked but kind, and you return it, a brief tether to humanity in this grinding routine. The water fetching is endless, a cycle that defines your mornings. Each trip blurs into the next, the weight of the amphory, a constant companion, the slosh of water, a metronome for your thoughts. You think of the fields you once worked, the Sabine hills, where the soil smelled of clover and rain, not blood and ash. But those memories are distant, frayed like the hem of your tunic. Here, the present is all-consuming, the creak of the yoke, the burn in your shoulders, the faint clink of chains from the gladiator's cells. You wonder about Marcus, whose life depends on the crowd's fickle favor. Does he dream of freedom, or has the ludus dulled that hope as it has for so many? By the time you finish the last trip, the sun is well above the walls, and the ludus hums with activity. The gladiators are deep in their drills, their shouts mingling with the clatter of wood on wood. You set the yoke down, your hands trembling slightly, and wipe the sweat from your brow. The water is delivered, the cauldrons filled, the basins brimming, but there's no rest. Flavia calls for you to fetch more herbs, and the doctor will soon need the stridules cleaned. The day stretches before you, a tapestry of small labors, woven with exhaustion. As you turn back toward the kitchen, a shout from the palestra catches your ear. Gladiator stumbles, his shield splintering under a heavy blow. The doctor's vitas snaps through the air, a warning, and the lanista watches from the sidelines, his face unreadable. You pause, just for a moment, the yoke still warm against your shoulder. Marcus is there, his net now tangled from a mistimed throw, his jaw tight with frustration. You know what comes next, the repairs, the oiling, the endless tending to his gear. But as you watch, a quieter question stirs in your mind. What unseen fault in that net, what hidden flaw in the weave might tip the balance between his life and death in the arena tomorrow? Preparing the barley porridge grind, the sun hangs higher now, its light spilling across the ludus, turning the sand of the palestra into a canvas of shifting shadows. Your shoulders still ache from the yoke, the ghost of the water's weight lingering in your muscles, but there's no pause in the rhythm of the day. The gladiators' drills grow louder, the clash of wooden swords and the grunt of exertion filling the air like a pulse. You catch a glimpse of Marcus, his net now untangled, his movements sharper as the doctor's vitas hovers nearby. But your focus shifts to the kitchen, where Flavia's voice cuts through the morning's hum, calling you to the next task, preparing. The barley porridge, the gladiator's staple, a thick gruel meant to fuel their bodies for the arena's demands. You step into the kitchen, the air warm and heavy with the scent of charring wood and the faint sweetness of grain. The hearth glows steadily, its embers casting a soft light across the blackened walls, where soot has settled in patterns like ancient script. Flavia stands at the grinding stone, her hands steady despite their gnarled joints, her apron dusted with flour and chaff. "Lucius, the barley," she says, her tone gruff but not unkind, pointing to a sack slumped against the wall. The sack is coarse, woven from hemp, its fibers prickling your fingers as you drag it to the stone mill. The barley inside is rough, hulled, but unpolished, sourced from the fields beyond Rome's walls, where farmers toil under the same sun that now warms your back. You kneel beside the mill, a heavy basalt contraption worn smooth by years of use. Its surface is cool to the touch, speckled with flecks of grain from countless mornings. You pour a measure of barley into the hopper, the kernels rattling like pebbles in a dry stream. The work is monotonous, the kind that numbs the mind and soothes the spirit in its repetition. You turn the handle, the stone grinding slowly, the sound a low, rhythmic groan that blends with the distant shouts from the palestra. Each rotation releases a faint, nutty aroma, the barley breaking down into coarse meal, dusting your hands with a gritty powder that clings to your skin like a second layer. The gladiator's diet is precise, designed to build strength without luxury. Barley is cheap, abundant, and dense, perfect for men whose bodies must withstand the arena's brutality. You've heard Flavia mutter about the old days when gladiators were fed wheat or even spelt, but times are leaner now, the ludus cutting corners to please its wealthy patrons. The barley porridge, or pulse, is mixed with salt and sometimes a drizzle of olive oil. Though the oil is rationed tightly, its sharp, green scent reserved for the veterans like Marcus. You measure the meal carefully, scooping it into a clay bowl, the grains sifting through your fingers like sand through an hourglass. Too little, and the gladiators will tire early. Too much, and the lanista will notice the discrepancy. His ledger as unforgiving as his whip as you grind. Flavia stirs the cauldron, the water you fetched earlier simmering gently. She adds a pinch of dried herbs bay and fennel, their earthy temps rising in the steam. The kitchen is a world of textures, the rough hemp of the sack, the slick clay of the bowl, the gritty meal under your nails. You pause to wipe your brow, the sweat mixing with barley dust, forming a faint paste on your skin. The air carries the faint sourness of yesterday's porridge, left to ferment in a corner for the servants' meager portions. Your stomach twists, a quiet reminder of the crusts you'll eat later, hardened and bland, shared with Gaius and the others in the dim corner of the slaves' quarters. The grinding stone is heavy, its weight pulling at your arms, but you've learned to lean into it, letting your body's momentum do the work. The motion is hypnotic, the world narrowing to the turn of the handle, the soft cascade of meal into the bowl below. You think of the gladiators who will eat this, their bodies sculpted by this labor as much as by their drills. Marcus, with his quick hands and guarded eyes, will take his share silently, his thoughts already on the arena. You wonder what he sees when he closes his eyes, his lost home in Hispania, perhaps, or the crowd's roar that might one day be his last. Flavia interrupts your thoughts, her voice low. "Faster, Lucius. The doctor wants them fed before the midday sun." You nod, quickening your pace, the stone's groan rising in pitch. The barley meal piles higher, its pale gold catching the light filtering through the kitchen's high window. Beyond the ludus, Rome churns on, the clatter of carts, the bleating of goats driven to market, the distant chant of priests at a temple altar. But here, your world is this stone, this grain, this moment. You pour another handful of barley, the kernels cool and hard, and resume the grind. The effort warming your hands against the morning's lingering chill. The other servants pass by the kitchen's open doorway, their arms laden with tasks of their own. You see the boy from earlier, his sack now empty, scurrying to fetch more water. Gaius appears briefly, his hands black with oil from the armory, carrying a bundle of leather straps to be mended. You exchange a glance, a silent tally of the morning's burdens. The ludus is a machine, each of you a cog turning in unison, driven by the lanista's will and the promise of survival. The gladiators, too, are part of it, their strength built on your unseen labor, their glory a distant dream you'll never touch when the bowl is full. You set it aside and start another, the second millstone waiting nearby. Flavia takes the first batch, mixing it into the cauldron with a wooden spoon, the water thickening into a paste that smells of earth and sustenance. She hums as she works, a tuneless drone that blends with the crackle of the hearth, and you find yourself matching her rhythm, the grindstone turning in time with her stirring. It's a small harmony, a fleeting respite in the day's grind, but the peace is broken by a shout from the palestra, the doctor's voice, sharp and impatient, calling for the gladiators to form ranks. You glance out the doorway, catching sight of Marcus as he adjusts his trident, the iron glinting dully in the sun. His net lies coiled at his feet, its knot still loose from the morning's mishap. You know you'll be tasked with fixing it later, your fingers picking at hemp cords under flickering lamplight. For now, though, the porridge demands your focus. You finish the second bowl, the meal piling high, and carry it to Flavia, your arms trembling slightly from the effort. She nods, her eyes on the cauldron, and you step back, wiping your hands on your tunic, the barley dust leaving faint streaks on the rough wool. The kitchen is warm now, the hearth's heat seeping into the walls, but your work here is nearly done. The porridge will simmer until it's ready to be ladled into wooden bowls, carried to the gladiators in their mess hall. You'll eat later, after the fighters are fed, your portion cold and sparse. As you clean the grinding stone, brushing away stray kernels with a rag, you hear the lanista's footsteps approaching, his boots heavy on the stone floor. His presence is a weight, like the yoke you carried earlier, and you keep your head down, your movements deliberate. He pauses at the doorway, his shadow falling across the mill, and you feel his eyes on you, assessing. Always assessing. The porridge bubbles softly, its steam curling upward, carrying the promise of another meal to sustain the ludus's brutal cycle. You think of Marcus, of the arena waiting beyond these walls, where the crowd's cheers drown out the quiet labors that keep him alive. And as the lanista turns away, his whip coiled but ever present, a question settles in your mind, heavy as the stone you've turned. What small oversight in this meal, what unnoticed flaw in its making might dull a gladiator's edge when the gates of the Colosseum swing open, sweeping the sand of yesterday's drills? The porridge is simmering now, its thick, earthy scent curling through the kitchen as Flavia stirs with her steady, practiced rhythm. You step away from the grinding stone, your hands still dusted with barley meal, the grit embedded under your nails. The lanista's shadow has passed, his footsteps fading toward the palestra. but his presence lingers like a weight in the air. The morning presses on, the sun climbing higher, its light slicing through the ludus's high walls to paint the sand of the training yard in stark golden patches. Your next task awaits, as relentless as the last, sweeping the palestra's sand, smoothing the scars of yesterday's drills to prepare for today's brutal rehearsals. You fetch the broom from the corner of the kitchen, its handle worn smooth by countless hands, the bristles frayed but still functional, bound with twine that smells faintly of mildew. The palestra is the heart of the ludus, a wide, open expanse where the gladiators hone their craft, their feet churning the sand into patterns of struggle and survival. As you step into the yard, the air shifts, carrying the sharp temps of sweat. The sand underfoot is coarse, imported from distant quarries, its grains flecked with mica that glint like tiny stars in the sunlight. But it's also uneven, pitted with divots from heavy boots and streaked where wooden swords dragged during sparring. You begin to sweep, the broom's bristles scraping softly against the sand, a rhythmic whisper that blends with the distant clatter of training weapons. The gladiators are deep in their drills now, Marcus among them, his net swinging in tight arcs as he faces a sciator, their movements a controlled dance of force and evasion. The doctor paces the perimeter, his vitus tapping his thigh, his eyes sharp as he corrects a stance or barks a command. You keep your head down, your focus on the sand, smoothing the ridges and filling the shallow trenches left by yesterday's chaos. The broom moves in long, deliberate strokes, each pass erasing a trace of the past scuff marks from Auretiarius's pivot, a smear where a shield was dropped, a faint stain of sweat or blood long since baked dry. The sand is unforgiving, clinging to your sandals, working its way into the creases of your tunic. It's a labor that feels futile, for the gladiators will churn it anew within hours, their heavy steps undoing your work as surely as the tides erase footprints on a shore. Yet there's a strange calm in the repetition, the way the broom's soft scrape drowns out the world's sharper edges. You pause to adjust your grip, the handle warm from your hands, and glance toward Marcus. His face is set, his jaw tight as he parries a blow, the net coiling like a living thing. You think of the tangled knots you'll mend later, the hemp biting into your fingers as you rework the weave under lamplight. The palestra is alive with motion, but you are its unseen caretaker. Other servants move along the edges, carrying water or bundles of training gear, their steps as silent as yours. Gaius passes nearby, his arms laden with leather straps, his hands still stained with oil from the armory. He nods, a brief acknowledgement, and you return it, your broom never pausing. The sand demands precision, too heavy a stroke, and you scatter it unevenly. Too light, and the surface remains marred. You've learned to find the balance, to let the broom glide just so, creating a smooth expanse that the doctor will inspect with a critical eye. A poorly swept yard could earn a lash, though the lanista is just as likely to ignore you entirely. Your labor is expected. Unremarkable, the backdrop to the gladiator's spectacle. The air grows warmer, the sun's heat soaking into the sand, and you feel sweat prickling along your brow. The ludus hums with its own rhythm, the clack of wood, the grunt of effort, the low murmur of servants exchanging hurried words. Beyond the walls, Rome pulses with life, the distant rumble of carts, the cry of a hawker selling figs, the faint toll of a temple bell. But here, your world is this yard, this broom, this endless smoothing of the earth. You think of the Sabine hills again, where you once swept dirt floors in a farmhouse, the air clean with the scent of clover. That life feels like a dream now, its edges blurred by the ludus's unyielding present. As you work, you notice the sand's subtle stories, a deep gouge near the center marks where a murmillo fell yesterday, his shield splintering under a heavy blow. A faint arc traces the path of a net, perhaps Marcus's, cast wide and then retrieved. You sweep these traces away, but they linger in your mind, fragments of the gladiator's world you'll never fully know. Their lives are bound to the arena, their names scrawled in betting ledgers, while yours is written nowhere, a shadow among shadows. Yet your work sustains then the clean sand, the filled cauldrons, the ground barleyall, threads in the tapestry of their survival. The doctor's voice cuts through your thoughts, sharp and sudden. Lucius, he barks, and you freeze, the broom still in your hands. He's standing at the yard's edge, his vitas pointed at a patch you've missed. A small ridge of sand near the post where Marcus trains. Mind your work, boy, or you'll feel this, he says, tapping the cane against his palm. You nod, your throat tight, and hurry to the spot, the broom moving faster now, smoothing the imperfection. The doctor watches for a moment, then turns back to the gladiators, his attention shifting to a novice who's dropped his sword. You exhale, the tension easing slightly, and resume your task. The sand is nearly smooth now, a blank canvas for the day's drills. You move to the edges of the palestra, where the sand meets the stone walls, and sweep away the accumulated grit bits of straw, a broken sandal strap, a shard of clay from a shattered water jug. Each piece tells a story, but you have no time to linger on them. The gladiators' shouts grow louder, the rhythm of their drills quickening, and you know the midday meal approaches. Soon you'll carry bowls of porridge to the mess hall, your hands still gritty from the sand and barley as you finish the last corner. You step back, the broom resting against your shoulder. The palestra gleams under the sun, its surface even almost serene, though it will soon be scarred again. Marcus pauses in his drills, wiping sweat from his brow, his net coiled tightly now, ready for the next bout. You catch his eye for a moment, and he nods, a rare gesture, fleeting but heavy with unspoken weight. You wonder what he sees in you, a servant, a shadow, or something more. The thought passes as quickly as it comes, buried under the next task calling your name. The lanista appears at the yard's edge, his whip still coiled, his gaze sweeping the sand. You hold your breath, waiting for his judgment, but he turns away without a word, his attention already elsewhere. The sand is acceptable, your labor invisible once more. As you lean the broom against the wall, ready to move to the mess hall, a faint unease settles in your chest. The palestra is smooth, but beneath its surface, the sand holds secret traces of falls, of failures, of moments that could spell doom in the arena. And as you glance at Marcus, his trident flashing in the sun, you wonder, what unseen mark in this sand, what hidden flaw in its sweep, might betray him when the crowd's cheers turn to cries for blood. Polishing the dull edges of iron blades, the palestra's sand lies smooth behind you. A fleeting triumph, erased by the gladiators' heavy steps as their drills churn the earth anew. The sun is high now, its heat pressing down on the ludus, warming the stone walls and drawing beads of sweat to your brow. The broom is back in its corner, and the distant clatter of wooden bowls signals the gladiators' midday meal. The barley porridge you ground, now sustaining their relentless training. But your work doesn't pause. You weave through the bustling yard, past the grunts of sparring and the doctor's sharp commands, toward the armory, a dim, iron-scented chamber where your next task awaits, polishing the dull edges of the gladiators' iron blades. You step into the armory. The air cooler here, heavy with the temps of metal and the faint musk of oiled leather. The walls are lined with racks of weapon stridents, short swords, daggers each, glinting dully under the light filtering through a high, narrow window. The floor is stone, worn smooth by years of footsteps, and it carries the chill of the earth below. A stark contrast to the sun-warmed palestra. You find Gaius already there, his hands blackened with oil as he sorts through a pile of leather straps, his fingers deft despite their calluses. He glances up, his crooked smile fleeting, and nods toward a wooden bench where a row of blades awaits your attention. Marcus's trident needs you, Lucius, he says, his voice low, as if the weapons themselves might overhear. You settle at the bench, the wood creaking under your weight, and pick up the trident, Marcus's weapon, its 3 prongs heavy and cold in your hands. The iron is pitted from use, its surface marred with scratches from training bouts, though these are practice blades, blunted to prevent mortal wounds in the palestra. In the arena, the edges will be honed to razor sharpness, but here, your task is to polish them to a dull sheen, removing rust and smoothing imperfections to ensure they move cleanly through the air. You take a rag, its fibers stiff with old oil, and a small clay jar of lanolin mixed with crushed pumice, the mixture gritty and slick under your fingers. The scent is sharp, almost medicinal, cutting through the armory's metallic haze. You begin to rub the trident's prongs, the rag gliding over the iron in slow, deliberate circles. The motion is rhythmic, almost meditative, the soft scrape of cloth against metal blending with the distant shouts from the palestra. Each pass reveals a faint gleam, the iron waking under your touch, though it will never shine like the polished bronze of a patrician's statue. You focus on the task, your hands moving with practiced care, but your mind drifts to Marcus. This trident is an extension of him, its weight balanced for his quick, fluid strikes, its prongs designed to trap a secutor's blade or snag an opponent's shield. You've seen him wield it, his movements precise yet strained, as if he carries not just the weapon, but the weight of the crowd's expectations. The armory is a world of its own, a place where the tools of violence are tended with quiet care. You work through the trident's prongs, then move to its shaft, polishing the iron where it meets the wooden handle, the wood darkened with sweat and oil from Marcus's grip. The lanolin leaves your hands slick, the pumice gritty under your nails, and you wipe them on your tunic, the rough wool absorbing the residue. Gaius hums softly as he works, mending a leather belt, his needle flashing in the dim light. You exchange no words, but his presence is a comfort, a reminder that you're not alone in this endless cycle of labor. Next, you take a short sword, a gladius meant for a its blade heavier than the trident, its edge dulled from clashing against shields. You apply the lanolin mixture, the rag catching on tiny burrs in the metal, each one a testament to the weapon's use. The gladius is simpler than the trident, its purpose blunt and brutal, designed for thrusting rather than finesse. You think of the murmillo who wields it, a broad-shouldered Gaul whose name you've never learned, his eyes always distant, as if fixed on a horizon beyond the ludus's walls. You polish methodically, smoothing the blade's surface, the iron warming under your hands. The armory's quiet is broken by the creak of the door, and the lanista steps in, his boots heavy on the stone. You and Gaius freeze, your hands stilling, the rag poised over the gladius. His gaze sweeps the room, lingering on the weapons, then on you. Faster, he says, his voice flat but edged with impatience. The games are tomorrow. No flaws, or it's your hide. He doesn't wait for a response. Turning on his heel, the whip at his belt swaying like a pendulum. You exhale, your heart steadying, and resume polishing, the rag moving quicker now, though your strokes remain precise. A flawed blade could mean a missed strike, a fumble in the arena disaster for a gladiator, punishment for you as you work. You notice the armory's small details, a nick in the gladius's hilt, a faint crack in the trident's wooden shaft, a stain on the rag that might be old blood. Each imperfection tells a story, a moment of strain or error in the palestra's controlled chaos. You think of Marcus again, his net and trident, a fragile lifeline in the arena's violence. You've heard whispers of tomorrow's games, a minor spectacle for a senator's birthday, but even minor games draw blood. The servants talk in hushed tones of a new retiarius, a boy barely 18, paired against a veteran's. Marcus, you hope, will face an easier foe, but hope is a thin thread in the ludus. The polishing is slow, deliberate, the kind of task that numbs the mind and calms the spirit. The iron gleams faintly now, the trident and gladius restored to their dull functionality. You set them back on the rack, their weight settling with a soft clank, and reach for another dagger, this time its blade short and wickedly curved, meant for a Democritus who fights with two blades. The work continues, the pile of weapons dwindling as the sun shifts outside, its light slanting through the window to cast long shadows across the floor. Gaius finishes his straps and moves to the next rack, his hands steady as he oils a shield's leather grip. You work in silence, the armory a cocoon of focus, but your thoughts wander to the arena, to the sand you swept earlier, soon to be stained with more than sweat. The weapons you polish are tools of survival, their edges a thin line between life and death. You wonder about Marcus, about the boy Retiarius, about the countless others whose fates are tied to these blades. Your hands, rough and stained, are part of that fate, though no crowd will ever know your name. As you finish the dagger, its iron smooth under your touch, you hear a shout from the palestra. Gladiator stumbles, the doctor's vitus cracking in warning. You glance toward the door, catching a glimpse of Marcus, his trident raised, his net coiled tightly. The games loom closer now, a shadow over the ludus. You set the dagger down, its blade glinting faintly, and wipe your hands, the lanolin leaving a slick film. The armory is nearly done, but the day stretches on, more tasks waiting. And as you step toward the next blade, a quiet question lingers, heavy as the iron in your hands. What unseen nick, what overlooked flaw in these weapons might falter when the arena's gates swing wide, binding the feet for morning marshes? The armories, cool shadows linger on your skin as you step back into the sunlit palestra, the faint scent of lanolin and iron clinging to your hands. The weapons you polished: Marcus's trident, the Murmillo's gladius, the Dimacharius's dagger rest neatly on their racks, their dull surfaces ready for the arena's brutal test. The sun is past its zenith now, the heat softening the edges of the ludus, though the air still carries the sharp tang of sweat and sand. The gladiators have broken for their midday meal, their voices a low rumble from the mess hall, where the barley porridge you helped prepare is being ladled out. But your work, as always, rolls on like the Tiber's ceaseless flow. Your next task calls, binding the gladiators' feet for the afternoon's training marches, a ritual to toughen their souls and steady their stance for the arena. You make your way to the storage shed near the palestra's edge, where the air smells of dry hemp and old leather. The shed is cramped, its walls lined with shelves of coiled ropes, spare sandals, and strips of linen rough, undyed cloth cut from worn-out tunics, repurposed for binding. You gather an armful of the linen strips, their texture coarse against your palms, and a small clay pot of beeswax, its faint, honeyed scent a rare softness in the ludus's harsh world. The wax will soften the bindings, preventing blisters that could hobble a fighter, though it's a small mercy against the grueling marches ahead. You sling a leather satchel over your shoulder, the bindings tucked inside, and head toward the gladiators' barracks, where they're finishing their meal. The barracks are a low stone building, its interior dim and thick with the musk of unwashed bodies and damp straw. You pause at the threshold, letting your eyes adjust to the gloom. Marcus is there, seated on a wooden bench, his bowl scraped clean, his trident propped against the wall. Other gladiators lounge nearby, a secutor with a scarred forearm, a Murmillo wiping crumbs from his beard, their voices low, a mix of bravado and exhaustion. The doctor's presence looms even here, his orders for the afternoon march already given, a trek through the ludus's outer grounds, a circuit designed to build endurance, mimicking the arena's relentless demands. Your role is to ensure their feet survive it, bound tightly to withstand the rocky paths and coarse sand. You kneel before Marcus first, as he's one of the veterans, his status earning him priority. His feet are calloused, the soles hardened from years of training, but still prone to cracking under the strain of long marches. You take a linen strip, its edges frayed but strong, and begin to wrap it around his ankle, crossing it over the arch and under the heel in a pattern you've practiced countless times. The cloth is cool against his skin, still damp from the bathhouse water you hauled earlier. You rub a thin layer of beeswax into the linen, your fingers slick with its waxy residue, the scent mingling with the barrack's stale air. The wax softens the binding, molding it to his foot's contours, a small shield against the grit and stones of the march. Marcus watches you work, his dark eyes unreadable, though you sense the weight of his thoughts. Tighter, he mutters, his voice rough from the morning's drills. You nod, pulling the linen taut, securing it with a knot that won't slip. His feet are broad, the toes splayed from years of gripping the palestra's sand. And you notice a fresh cut on his heel, likely from a stray rock during yesterday's march. You say nothing. Speaking out of turn could draw the doctor's ire, but you apply an extra layer of wax, hoping it will ease the sting. Marcus grunts, a sound that might be approval or indifference, and you move to his other foot, repeating the process with the same careful precision. The other gladiators wait their turn, some impatient, others silent. You move down the line, binding the secutor's feet next, his ankles thick with muscle, then the murmillo, whose calluses are so deep they feel like leather under your touch. Each binding is a small ritual, a moment of connection in a world that denies you equality. The linen strips pile up in your satchel, their coarse texture a contrast to the wax's slick warmth. You work quickly, but methodically, aware of the doctor's shadow outside, his vitus tapping as he inspects the gladiator's gear. A poorly bound foot could mean a stumble, a sprain, a weakness in the erinon. The blame would fall on you, not the fighter. The barracks hum with low conversation, snippets of Latin and foreign tongues Thracian, Greek blending into a murmur that feels almost soothing. You catch fragments, talk of tomorrow's games, a rumor of a lion in the arena, a jest about the lanista's latest mistress. You keep your head down, your hands moving, but you listen, storing these scraps like coins in a beggar's purse. The gladiators rarely speak to you directly, but their words paint a world beyond your reach. The Colosseums roar, the fleeting glory of a victor's wreath, the ever-present specter of death. You think of Marcus, his net and trident waiting in the armory, their polished surfaces, your handiwork. Will they serve him well tomorrow, or will some unseen floyers or another's betray him? As you finish the last gladiator, a young Retiarius whose nervous glances betray his inexperience, you rise, your knees aching from the stone floor. The linen strips are nearly gone, the wax pot lighter in your satchel. You wipe your hands on your tunic, the beeswax, leaving faint streaks beside the barley dust and lanolin from earlier tasks. The gladiators are lacing their sandals now, the leather straps creaking as they prepare for the march. Outside, the doctor calls for formation, his voice sharp as a blade, and the men shuffle out, their bound feet thudding against the floor. Marcus lingers a moment, adjusting his belt, his trident in hand. He doesn't look at you, but you feel his presence, heavy with the weight of tomorrow's uncertainty. You follow them to the palestra, where the march will begin, the satchel slung over your shoulder. The sun is softer now, dipping toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the sand you swept earlier. The gladiators form ranks, their bound feet steady, their faces set. The doctor leads them out, toward the outer grounds, where the path winds through scrubby hills, its stones sharp enough to test even the tightest bindings. You watch from the sidelines, your task complete for now, though the day holds more, mending nets, fetching water, scrubbing the mess hall's bowls as the column moves out. Marcus at its head, you notice the young Retiarius stumbling slightly, his bindings, perhaps, to loose. You make a mental note to check them tomorrow, if he survives the games. The ludus feels quieter now, the absence of the gladiators, leaving a hollow calm, broken only by the clatter of other servants at their tasks. You think of the Sabine hills again, where your feet once walked free, unbound by linen or chains. but that memory fades, replaced by the present. The weight of the satchel, the wax under your nails, the distant crunch of the gladiator's march. And as you turn back toward the barracks, ready to gather the empty bowls, a quiet question tugs at your mind. Soft but persistent. What small slip in these bindings, what overlooked knot, might unravel when the arena's sand drinks deep of tomorrow's blood? Enduring the whips of the lanistas, the gladiators have marched out, their bound feet kicking up faint clouds of dust as they disappear into the scrubby hills beyond the ludus. The palestra lies quiet now, its sand marked with fresh tracks, the echoes of their drills replaced by the soft clatter of servants' tasks. Your satchel, emptied of linen strips and beeswax, hangs light on your shoulder as you return to the barracks to gather the gladiators' empty porridge bowls. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows that stretch across the stone walls, and the air carries a cooling edge, laced with the faint scent of crushed thyme from the herb garden. But the calm is deceptive, for the lanista's presence looms, his mood as unpredictable as a storm over the Tiber. Your next task is no task at all, but a constant vigilance, enduring the whips of his temper. Navigating the ludus under the weight of his scrutiny, you stack the wooden bowls, their surfaces sticky with porridge remnants, and carry them to the kitchen, where Flavia is already scrubbing cauldrons. The air is warm, thick with the lingering steam of barley and the smoky tang of the hearth. You set the bowls near the wash basin, the wood clattering softly, and fetch a bucket of water from the cistern your earlier hauls, already dwindling under the ludus's endless thirst. The water sloshes as you pour it, cold against your hands, washing away the last traces of beeswax and barley dust. Flavia grunts, her eyes on her work, but her presence is steady, a quiet anchor in the day's relentless tide. The lanista's boots echo before you see him, a heavy tread that sends a ripple of tension through the kitchen. You straighten, wiping your hands on your tunic, the rough wool catching the damp. He stands in the doorway, his silhouette broad, the whip at his belt coiled but ever present, its leather worn smooth from use. His face is a map of old scars, his eyes sharp with a restless discontent that you've learned to dread. "Lucius," he says, his voice low but cutting, "the armory's not done, blades still tarnished. You think the crowd cheers for rust?" His words are a lash, though the whip remains still for now. You nod, head bowed, murmuring, "No Dominus," and move quickly toward the armory. The bowls left for Flavia to finish. The armory is dim, the air heavy with iron and oil, as it was when you polished Marcus's trident earlier. Gaius is gone, his leather straps mended and stacked, leaving you alone with the racks of weapons. You find the blades. The lanista mentioned a pair of gladi, their surfaces speckled with faint rust from yesterday's damp air. You take the same rag and lanolin mixture, the gritty pumice stinging your raw fingers, and begin to polish again, the soft scrape of cloth against iron, a familiar rhythm. The lanista's accusation stings more than the pumice. You'd checked each blade, but the damp seeps into everything here, rust blooming like a quiet betrayal. You work faster now, the rag moving in tight circles, the iron gleaming faintly under your touch. The lanista doesn't follow, but his mood lingers, a shadow that colors the ludus. You've seen him strike for less a spilled bucket, a crooked knot, a glance held too long. His whip, The flagellum is a tool of precision, its leather thongs designed to bruise without breaking skin, a punishment that leaves you working through the pain. You felt it once, months ago, when a water amphora cracked under your grip, the lash burning across your shoulders like fire. The memory makes you grip the rag tighter, your strokes more deliberate, as if perfection could shield you from his next whim. Outside, the gladiators' march continues, their distant shouts muffled by the hills. You think of Marcus, his bound feet treading the rocky path, his trident and net waiting here for tomorrow's games. The lanista's temper extends to them to a missed step in the palestra, a weak thrust, and his whip cracks, the doctor echoing his displeasure. But for you, the servants, the stakes are quieter, the punishments more personal. A gladiator's failure might mean death in the arena. Yours means a lash, a skipped meal, or a night scrubbing latrines under torchlight. You move to the next gladius, its hilt worn from a murmillo's grip, and polish with care, checking each inch for rust. The armory's quiet is a small mercy, broken only by the occasional creak of the ludus's walls, or the distant bleat of a goat beyond the gates. You think of Gaius, of Flavia, of the boy hauling barley sacks, all of you bound by the lanista's will. There's a rhythm to this life, a grim dance of tasks and survival, and you've learned its steps. Keep your head down, move quickly, anticipate the next order. But the lanista's mood is a variable you can't predict, shifting with the day's heat or the weight of a patron's purse. As you finish the gladi, you hear footsteps, not the lanista's heavy tread, but lighter, hurried. The boy from earlier, the one with hollow eyes, darts into the armory, his arms full of soiled linens from the infirmary. Lucius, he whispers, glancing over his shoulder, the lanistas in the palestra, shouting at the doctor. Something about the new retiarius. His voice is tight, and you nod, setting the rag down. The news stirs a flicker of Anis Marcus is out there, and the games are tomorrow. A lanista in a foul mood could mean harsher drills, tighter scrutiny, more chances for a whip to fall. You step outside, the sun lower now, painting the ludus in hues of amber and dust. The palestra is empty, the gladiators still on their march, but you hear the lanista's voice, sharp and carrying, from the direction of the outer grounds. You don't linger. Curiosity is a luxury you can't afford. Instead, you return to the kitchen, where Flavia is drying the last of the bowls, her hands red from the cold water. "He's like a dog with a bone today," she mutters, not looking up. "Best stay out of his way." You nod, stacking the bowls. There would still damp under your fingers, and prepare to fetch more water for the evening's needs. The ludus hums with its usual rhythm, servants moving like shadows, the clatter of tasks filling the gaps left by the gladiator's absence. You think of Marcus, his feet bound by your hands, his trident polished by your care. Tomorrow he'll face the arena, where the lanista's mood could mean a harder match, a foe chosen to please a capricious crowd. Your work, invisible as it is, weaves into his fate the smooth blades, the tight bindings, the swept sand. But the lanista's temper is a thread you can't control, a force that could snap at any moment as you lift the bucket. The waters wait familiar against your palms. You glance toward the hills where the gladiators march. The sun is sinking, the sky streaked with pink, and the air carries the faint scent of dust and distant rain. The lanista's voice fades, but his shadow remains, a reminder of the whip's reach. And as you turn back to your task, a quiet question settles in your chest, heavy as the bucket in your hands. What small misstep, what unnoticed slight might draw the lanista's whip before the night is through? Oiling the sweaty skins after sparring, the gladiators return from their march, their footsteps heavy, kicking up dust that swirls in the fading light. The sun is low now, painting the ludus in hues of amber and shadow, the air cooling with the promise of evening. You've just set the bucket of water down in the kitchen, its weight no longer a burden, but a familiar ache in your arms. When the doctor's sharp whistle signals the end of the march, the men trudge back into the palestra, their bound feet scuffed and dusty, their faces slick with sweat from the grueling circuit through the hills. Marcus leads the column, his trident propped on his shoulder, his net coiled tightly, though his eyes are distant, fixed on some unseen point. Your next task awaits in the bathhouse, oiling the gladiators' sweaty skins after their sparring, a ritual to soothe their muscles and prepare them for tomorrow's arena. You make your way to the bathhouse, weaving through the palestra, where servants are already sweeping the day's fresh marks from the sand. The air carries the faint tang of crushed herbs and the lingering musk of exertion, a reminder of the ludus's unyielding rhythm. The bathhouse is a cavernous space, its tiled walls damp with condensation, the faint echo of dripping water mingling with the low hum of voices. The basins you filled earlier shimmer under the flickering light of oil lamps, their surfaces reflecting the chipped mosaics of Neptune and sea creatures, faded but still gleaming in the dimness. You fetch a clay amphora of olive oil from the storage alcove, its scent sharp and green, a luxury rationed carefully for the gladiator's care. In your other hand, you carry a bronze strigil, its curved edge cool and heavy, designed to scrape sweat and dirt from their skin. The gladiators file in, stripping off their sweat-soaked tunics and sandals, their bound feet leaving faint prints on the tiles. Marcus is among the first, his chest heaving from the march, his skin glistening with sweat that catches the lamplight. You approach him, head bowed, and pour a small measure of oil into your palm, its slick warmth spreading across your fingers. The oil is precious, pressed from olives grown in the hills beyond Rome, and you use it sparingly, knowing the lanista counts every drop. You rub it into Marcus's shoulders, your hands gliding over the taut muscles, scarred from old wounds and fresh bruises. The oil smells of earth and sunlight, a fleeting reminder of a world beyond these walls, and you work it into his skin, easing the tension from the day's drills. Marcus says nothing, his breath steadying as you move to his arms, the oil smoothing the roughness of his calluses. You take the strigil next, its bronze edge scraping gently across his skin, collecting sweat and dust in thin, curling strips. The motion is rhythmic, almost soothing, the soft scrape blending with the drip of water and the low murmurs of other gladiators being tended nearby. You work carefully, avoiding the fresh bruise on his forearm, a mark from a secutor shield, likely from this morning's sparring. The strigil's edge is dull, designed to clean without cutting, but you've seen careless servants draw blood, earning the lanista's whip. Your hands move with practiced precision, the oil and strigil, a quiet dance of care in this brutal world. Other servants move among the gladiators, their hands slick with oil, their strigils flashing in the lamplight. Gaius is there, tending to the murmillo with the distant eyes, his fingers quick as he applies oil to the man's broad back. The bathhouse is a place of temporary reprieve, where the gladiators' bodies are mended, their strength preserved for the arena. But it's also a place of tension, for the lanista's shadow looms even here. You've heard him berate a servant for wasting oil, his voice sharp as a blade, and you measure each pore with care. The amphoras wait lightning too quickly for comfort as you finish with Marcus. Moving to his legs, you notice the young Retiarius from earlier, the one with nervous eyes, sitting alone on a stone bench. His skin is unmarked, his muscles lean but untested, and he flinches as another servant applies oil, his body tense with the fear of tomorrow's games. You think of the rumors lion, a veteran secutor, a senator's women wonder if he'll survive his first bout. Marcus, too, carries that weight, though he hides it behind his guarded gaze. You scrape the strigil across his calf, the oil mixing with sand from the march, and you feel the heat of his skin, the pulse of life beneath it. For a moment, you're not just a servant, but a keeper of his strength. Your hands part of the chain that binds him to survival. The bathhouse fills with the soft sounds of care, the splash of water as a basin is refilled, the scrape of strigils, the occasional grunt as oil soothes a strained muscle. The air is heavy with the scent of olive oil and damp stone, a contrast to the palestra's dust and the armory's iron. You move to the next gladiator, a secutor with a scarred forearm, his skin rough under your hands. The oil slicks his muscles, the strigil clearing away the day's grime, and you work in silence, your thoughts drifting to the arena. Tomorrow, these men will fight, their bodies oiled and ready, their fates tied to the crowd's fickle cheers. Your labor sweeping sand, polishing blades, binding feet, oiling skin threads through their survival. Invisible but essential, the doctor enters, his Vetus tucked under his arm, his eyes scanning the room. "Hurry," he says, his voice low but firm. "The lanista wants them rested before nightfall." You nod, quickening your pace, the strigil moving faster across the secutor's back. The lanista's mood, volatile as it was earlier, hangs over the ludus like a storm cloud. You've heard the servant's whisper of his anger in the hills, his shouts at the doctor over the new Retiarius's clumsy steps. The games loom closer, a senator's spectacle that could elevate or destroy the ludus's reputation. Marcus, you hope, will fare well, his net and trident honed by your hands. But hope is a fragile thing, easily crushed by a whip's crack or a blade's falter. As you finish you wipe your hands on your tunic, the oil leaving faint stains beside the beeswax and barley dust. The bathhouse is nearly done, the gladiators moving to the barracks to rest, their bodies clean but heavy with the day's toll. You glance at Marcus as he leaves, his stride steady but slow, his trident a dark silhouette against the lamplight. The young Retiarius lingers, his eyes still nervous, and you wonder what he'll face tomorrow, beast or man, glory or death. The amphora is nearly empty, the strigil heavy in your hand, and you return them to the alcove, your fingers aching from the day's labors. The ludus settles into evening, the air cooling, the sounds softening to the clatter of servants' tasks and the distant call of a night bird. You step outside, the tiles cold under your feet, and glance at the sky, streaked with the last of the sunset. Tomorrow's games cast a long shadow, and your work, every sweep, every polish, every binding will follow the gladiators into the arena. But as you turn back to the bathhouse, ready to scrub the basins clean, a quiet question lingers, soft as the oil on your hands. What unseen strain, what overlooked ache in these oiled bodies might falter when the Colosseum's roar drowns out all else? Mending the torn leathers in flickering lamplight, the bathhouse grows quiet as the gladiators depart, their oiled bodies leaving faint trails of olive scent in the cooling air. The sun has set, and the ludus settles into the hush of evening, broken only by the soft clatter of servants' tasks and the distant hoot of an owl beyond the walls. You've scrubbed the bathhouse basins, the cold water stinging your hands, washing away the last traces of oil and grit. Your tunic is streaked with the day's labor's barley dust, beeswax, lanolin, and now the faint damp of bathwater. But there's no time to linger. The lamplight calls you to the next task, mending the torn leathers of the gladiator's gear. A quiet labor under flickering flames as the ludus prepares for tomorrow's games. You make your way to the armory, where the air is thick with the familiar tang of iron and leather. The room is dimly lit, the oil lamps casting a warm, unsteady glow across the racks of weapons and stacks of armor. Gaius is already there, hunched over a wooden table, his needle glinting as he stitches a leather strap. He looks up, his eyes tired but sharp, and nods toward a pile of gear in the corner. Marcus's belt tore again, he says, his voice low, roughened by the day's dust. And the new retiarius's arm guard. Get to it, Lucius, you nod, settling at the table. The wood, cool and worn under your hands, its surface scarred from years of such work. You sift through the pile, finding Marcus's belt, a thick strip of leather, cracked at the edges, its stitching frayed from the strain of his net and trident. The arm guard is there too, a lighter piece for the young retiarius, its leather softer, untested, but torn where a buckle caught during sparring. You gather a bone needle, its point dulled but functional, and a coil of hemp thread, its fibers coarse and strong. The lamplight flickers, casting shadows that dance across the leather, and you squint to thread the needle, your fingers stiff from the day's endless tasks. The air smells of oil and hide, a heavy, grounding scent that steadies your focus. You begin with Marcus's belt, folding the torn edges together and piercing the leather with the needle, the hemp thread pulling taut with each stitch. The work is slow, deliberate, the needle's passage a soft scrape against the hide, blending with the faint crackle of the lamp's wick. The leather is tough, resisting your efforts, but you've learned to coax it, your hands finding a rhythm that numbs the mind. Each stitch is a small act of preservation, ensuring the belt holds fast when Marcus swings his net in the arena. You think of him, resting now in the barracks, his body oiled and bound, his fate tied to the gear you mend. A loose stitch, a weak seam, could mean a fumble, a fall, a fatal misstep under the Colosseum's roar. The lamplight wavers, the oil burning low, and you pause to trim the wick, the flame steadying under your touch. Gaius works silently across the table, his needle flashing as he repairs a shield strap, his fingers nimble despite their calluses. You share the space without words. The armory, a haven of quiet labor amid the ludus's tension. The days earlier, lanista's volatile mood. His whip's coiled threat lingers in your thoughts. But here, in this flickerlit corner, you find a moment's peace. The leather yields to your needle, the thread binding it tight, and you lose yourself in the task, the world narrowing to the stitch, the hide, the flame. You finish the belt, tying off the thread with a double knot, and set it aside, its leather now whole, if scarred. The relentless's arm guard is next, its tier more delicate, the leather thinner, meant to protect a forearm, unmarred by years of combat. You stitch carefully, the needle piercing the softer hide, the hemp thread weaving a pattern that will hold against the strain of tomorrow's games. You think of the young Gladiatorius, his nervous eyes in the bathhouse, his body tense with the fear of what's to come. His gear must be perfect, for a novice has no margin for error in the arena's unforgiving sand. The armory's quiet is broken by a distant shout, the lanista's voice, sharp and carrying from the direction of the barracks. Your hands pause, the needle halfway through a stitch, and Gaius meets your gaze, his expression tight. "He's at it again," he mutters, his voice barely above a whisper. Something about the new boy's stance. Pray he doesn't come here. You nod, resuming your work, the needle moving faster now, though your stitches remain precise. The lanista's temper is a specter, haunting every corner of the loop, and you've learned to work through its shadow, your hands steady even as your heart quickens. As you finish the arm guard, you inspect it under the lamplight, the stitches, even the leather taut. You set it beside Marcus's belt, the pile of mended gear growing as the night deepens. The armory is a world of small repairs, each stitch a thread in the gladiator's survival. Though no crowd will ever see your work, you think of Marcus, of the young Gladiators, of the countless others whose lives depend on these quiet labors. The leather smells of earth and sweat, a reminder of the bodies it protects. And you wonder what tomorrow will bring: a victor's wreath, a fatal wound, or the lanista's whip for a flaw you missed. Gaius finishes his strap and rises, stretching his back with a soft groan. "I'm for the barracks," he says, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Don't stay too long, Lucius." The lanista's eyes are everywhere. You nod. But there's one more piece to mend: a sandal strap, torn from a murmellow's heavy tread. You thread the needle again, the hemp catching faintly on your calloused fingers, and begin to stitch, the lamplight casting your shadow across the table. The armory grows quieter, the ludus settling into the night, though the tension of tomorrow's games hums beneath it all. Outside, the air is cool, carrying the faint scent of rain and the distant murmur of Rome's nightlife tavern songs, cartwheels. But here, in the armory's glow, your world is the needle, the leather, the thread. You finish the sandal strap, tying off the final knot, and lean back, your hands aching, your eyes heavy from the lamplight's strain. The mended gear lies ready, a small bulwark against the arena's chaos. But as you rise, ready to return to the barracks, a quiet question settles in your mind, soft as the flicker of the dying lamp. What unseen tear, what overlooked stitch in this leather might give way when the arena's gates swing open and the crowd's cheers turn to cries? Carrying the heavy buckets to the baths, the armory's lamplight fades behind you as you step into the cool night air. the mended leathers Marcus's belt, the young Retiarius's arm guard, the Murmelo's sandals strapped, left neatly stacked for tomorrow's games. The ludus is quiet now, its rhythm slowed to the soft shuffle of servants finishing their tasks and the distant creak of the gladiators' bunks in the barracks. The sky is a deep indigo, pricked with stars, and the air carries the faint damp of approaching rain, mingling with the ever-present dust of the palestra. Your hands ache from the day's labors grinding barley, sweeping sand, polishing blades, stitching leather, but the night holds one more task, carrying heavy buckets of water to the bathhouse, ensuring the basins are filled for the gladiators' morning ablutions before the arena's call. You head toward the cistern, its squat stone form looming at the edge of the ludus, fed by the aqueduct's steady trickle. The path is familiar, worn smooth by your countless trips, the ground cool under your bare feet. You fetch 2 wooden buckets from the storage shed, their iron handles cold and biting, their interiors stained dark from years of use. The buckets are heavy, even empty, their weight a promise of the strain to come. You sling them over your shoulders, the handles digging into the tender spots where the yoke left bruises earlier, and approach the cistern, its water glinting faintly under the starlight. Rippling with the night's gentle breeze, you dip the first bucket, the water rushing in with a low gurgle, its coldness splashing against your wrists. The second follows, the weight pulling at your arms as you lift them, the buckets sloshing with each step. The path to the bathhouse is short but treacherous in the dark, the ground uneven with stray stones and patches of slick mud from yesterday's rain. You move slowly, your steps deliberate, the water's weight swaying with your stride. The air smells of wet stone and the faint tang of the Tiber, carried on the wind from beyond the ludus walls. Rome's distant hum-tavern laughter, a cart's creak fades into the background, your world narrowing to the bucket's strain and the soft splash of water against wood. The bathhouse looms ahead, its tiled roof a dark silhouette against the sky. Inside, the air is damp and warm, the earlier oiling of the gladiators' skins leaving a lingering scent of olive and sweat. The basins, partially drained from the evening's use, stand ready for your buckets. You pour the water carefully, the liquid catching the faint glow of a single oil lamp left burning, its flame casting shadows across the chipped mosaics of Neptune's trident. The splash echoes in the cavernous space, a steady rhythm that blends with the drip of a leaky pipe, a sound as constant as the ludus itself. You empty the first bucket, then the second, the muscles in your shoulders burning as the last drops fall. You return to the cistern, the buckets lighter now, but still cumbersome, their handles creaking as you walk. The task is repetitive, a mirror of the morning's water fetching, but the night adds a weight of its own, the silence, the looming games, the lanista's temper still a shadow in your thoughts. You think of Marcus, resting now, his body oiled and his gear mended, ready for the senator's spectacle tomorrow. The young Retiarius, too, lingers in your mind, his nervous eyes a reminder of the arena's stakes. Your buckets, your water, are part of their preparation, though no crowd will cheer for the unseen labor that fills these basins. The second trip is harder, the bucket's weight compounded by the day's fatigue. You pass Gaius near the barracks, his form a shadow as he hauls a sack of straw for the gladiators' pallets. He nods, his face barely visible, and you return the gesture, a silent bond in the night's quiet. The cistern's water is colder now, the night's chill seeping into the stone, and you grit your teeth as it splashes your tunic, the damp fabric clinging to your skin. You lift the buckets again, the strain pulling at your back, and make your way back to the bathhouse, the path lit only by starlight and the faint glow from the ludus's scattered lamps. Inside the bathhouse, you pour the water, the basins filling steadily, their surfaces rippling under the lamplight. You pause for a moment, your hands gripping the bucket handles, the wood worn smooth by years of use. The air is heavy with the scent of damp tiles and olive oil, a contrast to the armory's leather and iron. You think of the gladiators who will use this water tomorrow, washing away the dust of the palestra before donning their armor for the arena. Marcus's trident, the young Resurrius's arm guard, the swept sandal your labors weave into their survival, threads in a tapestry no one sees. The doctor's voice echoes faintly from the barracks, a low murmur as he checks the gladiators' bunks, ensuring they rest for tomorrow. The lanista's temper, though quieted for now, remains a specter, his whip a coiled threat that could strike at any oversight. You've heard whispers of his plans for the game's a lion, perhaps, or a matched pair of veterans to thrill the senator's guests. The thought tightens your chest, but you push it aside, focusing on the buckets, the water, the task at hand. You make one final trip to the cistern, the buckets heavier with each step, your arms trembling as you fill them again, as you pour the last of the water. The basins brimming now, you wipe your brow, the sweat mixing with the damp on your hands. The bathhouse is ready, its tiles gleaming faintly, the air thick with the promise of morning. You set the buckets down, their handles leaving red marks on your palms, and step outside, the night air cool against your skin. The ludus is still, the gladiators asleep, the servants' tasks winding down. You think of Marcus, of the young Resurrius, of the arena waiting beyond these walls, your work fetching water, mending leather, oiling skins, their foundation, though it will never be named, as you turn toward the barracks, ready to collapse onto your straw pallet. The stars above glimmer, faint and unyielding. The games loom closer, their shadow heavy on the ludus. And as you walk, the bucket's weight still echoing in your shoulders, a quiet question settles in your mind, soft as the ripple of water in the basins. What unnoticed spill, what overlooked crack in these buckets might falter when the gladiators step into the arena's merciless light, feeding the gladiators' meager supper? The bathhouse basins are filled, their surfaces still rippling faintly as you leave the cavernous space, the night's chill clinging to your damp tunic. The ludus is hushed now, the stars bright overhead, their light doing little to pierce the darkness of the compound's paths. Your shoulders ache from the bucket's weight, your hands raw from the day's endless tasks, grinding barley, sweeping sand, polishing blades, mending leather, oiling skin, but the day's labor isn't done. The gladiators, resting in their barracks, will need their supper soon, a meager meal to sustain them through the night before tomorrow's games. Your task now is to help Flavia prepare and serve it, a final act of care in the ludus's relentless cycle. You make your way to the kitchen, the air cool and heavy with the scent of damp earth and distant rain. The path is quiet, the other servants' footsteps fading as they finish their own tasks, sweeping, hauling, scrubbing. The kitchen glows faintly, a single oil lamp casting a warm light across the blackened walls, where the hearth's embers still smolder. Flavia is there, her hands dusted with flour, stirring a pot of thin vegetable stew over the low fire. The air smells of boiled lentils, onions, and a faint hint of thyme. A modest meal compared to the morning's barley porridge, but enough to keep the gladiators strong. "Lucius," she says, her voice gruff but steady, "fetch the bread and start cutting. They'll be hungry soon." You nod, moving to the wooden shelf where the day's bread sits down. Coarse loaves, made from barley and the cheapest wheat, baked hard to stretch the rations. The loaves are heavy in your hands, their crusts rough and flecked with ash from the oven. You set them on the table, its surface worn from years of knives, and take a blunt iron blade, its edge dulled from countless meals. You slice carefully, the bread crumbling slightly under the pressure. Each piece thick enough to sop up the stew, but small enough to ration fairly. The work is familiar, your hands moving with a rhythm honed by repetition. Though the ache in your fingers protests each cut, Flavia ladles the stew into wooden bowls. The steam rising in thin curls, carrying the earthy scent of lentils and the faint sweetness of softened onions. The pot is small, the portions measured to avoid waste, for the lanista's ledger tracks every grain and drop. You stack the bread slices beside the bowls, their rough texture a contrast to the stew's warmth. The gladiator's supper is simple stew bread. A sip of watered wine for the veterans, like Marcus, but it's fuel for the arena, where strength can mean survival. You think of Marcus, his body oiled and resting, his trident polished and ready. This meal, like your other labors, is a thread in his fate, unseen but vital. The barracks are your next stop, the bowls balanced in your arms, the bread tucked into a hemp sack slung over your shoulder. The path is dark, the ludus's lamps burning low, and you move carefully to avoid spilling the stew, its warmth seeping through the wood into your hands. The barracks are dim, the air thick with the musk of straw and sweat. The gladiators sprawled on their bunks or seated on benches, their voices a low murmur. Marcus is there, his back against the wall, his eyes half closed but alert. The young Resiarius sits apart, his knees drawn up, his fingers tracing the edge of his newly mended arm guard. You set the bowls down on a long table, the bread beside them, and step back as the gladiators gather. You serve Marcus first, as custom demands for a veteran. He takes the bowl without a word, his fingers brushing yours, calloused and warm. The stew's steam rises between you, and you notice the faint tension in his jaw. The weight of tomorrow's games heavy in his silence. You move down the line, handing bowls to the secutor with the scarred forearm, the murmillo with distant eyes, and finally the young Resiarius, who takes his with trembling hands. The bread is passed out next, each man receiving a single slice, the portions equal, but never enough. You catch snippets of their talk-rough jests, a whispered prayer, a rumor of a lion in the Arenand. You store them away, fragments of a world you'll never fully know. The doctor enters, his Vetus tucked under his arm, his presence silencing the murmurs. "Eat quickly," he says, his voice low but firm. "Rest is your weapon now." The gladiators nod, their spoons scraping against the bowls, the bread breaking with soft cracks. You stand at the edge of the room, ready to collect the empty bowls, your eyes on the floor to avoid drawing attention. The lanista's temper, though quieted for now, lingers in your thoughts, his whip a coiled threat that could strike at any misstep, a spilled bowl, a crumb left behind, a moment's idleness as the gladiators eat. You think of the day's labors, the water you hauled, the sand you swept, the blades you polished, the leather you stitched. Each task weaves into this meal, into the strength these men will carry into the arena. Marcus finishes quickly, setting his bowl down with a soft thud, his eyes meeting yours for a fleeting moment, a nod, barely perceptible, but heavy with unspoken weight. The young Retiarius eats slowly, his spoon hesitating, and you wonder what he sees in his mind's eye: the Colosseum's sand, a secutor's blade, or the crowd's roar turning to gears. You collect the bowls as they empty, the wood warm and slick with stew residue. The bread is gone, not a crumb wasted, for hunger is a constant in the ludus, even for the gladiators. You carry the bowls back to the kitchen, the sack now empty, your steps heavy with the day's toll. Flavia is still there, scrubbing the pot, her hands red from the cold water. "They're fed," she mutters, not looking up. "Now clean those and get to your palate. Tomorrow's no kinder than today." You nod, setting the bowls in the wash basin, the water cold against your raw hands, washing away the last of the stew's warmth. The ludus is nearly silent now, the gladiators settling into their bunks, the servants' tasks dwindling to whispers. You think of Marcus, of the young Retiarius, of the arena waiting beyond these walls. Tomorrow's games loom like a storm, their outcome tied to your unseen labor's water, sand, blades, leather, stew. The lanista's shadow, though absent now, remains a weight, his whip a reminder of the cost of imperfection. As you dry the last bowl, stacking it neatly on the shelf, a quiet question settles in your mind, soft as the steam that rose from the stew. What unnoticed fault in this meal, what overlooked skimping of broth or bread might weaken a gladiator's hand when the arena's gates swing wide, sweeping the barracks' dusty floors? The kitchen is silent now. The last of the gladiators' supper bowls stacked neatly on the shelf, their surfaces still damp from washing. The hearth's embers glow faintly, casting a soft warmth across the blackened walls. But the air outside is cool, heavy with the scent of impending rain and the dust of the ludus. Your hands, raw from the day's labors grinding barley, sweeping sand, polishing blades, stitching leather, oiling skin, carrying water, serving stoic with a dull persistence. The weight of each task layered into your bones. The gladiators are in their bunks, their murmurs fading into snores, but your work stretches into the night. The final task awaits, sweeping the barracks' dusty floors, clearing the grit and straw to ensure the gladiators wake to a clean space before tomorrow's games. You fetch a broom from the kitchen's corner, its bristles worn and splayed, the handle smooth from years of use. The path to the barracks is dark, lit only by the faint glow of a few oil lamps hung along the ludus walls, their flames flickering in the night breeze. The ground underfoot is uneven, scattered with pebbles and patches of dried mud, and you move carefully, the broom slung over your shoulder like a soldier's spear. The air carries the faint musk of straw and sweat from the barracks, a reminder of the men sleeping within, their bodies honed for the arena's violence, their fates tied to your unseen labors. The barracks are a long, low building, its stone walls rough and cool to the touch. You step inside, the air thick with the scent of unwashed bodies and damp straw, the lamplight casting long shadows across the rows of bunks. Marcus lies in one, his form a dark outline, his trident propped against the wall, its polished prongs catching the faint light. The young Retiarius is nearby, curled tightly on his pallet, his mended arm guard tucked beside him like a talisman. The other gladiators, Secutor, Murmelo. You begin to sweep, the brooms, bristles, scraping gently against the stone floor, stirring up clouds of dust that dance in the lamplight. The floor is littered with the day's detritus, straw from the pallets, crumbs from the supper bread, a broken sandal strap, a scattering of sand tracked in from the palestra. You move methodically, the broom gliding in long, even strokes, gathering the debris into small piles. The work is quiet, almost meditative, the soft scrape blending with the gladiator's snores and the distant drip of water from the bathhouse. You take care not to disturb the men, your steps light, your broom angled to avoid the bunks. A clumsy sweep could wake them, earning a curse or worse. The doctor's vidus, if he's nearby, patrolling the ludus's night. The dust clings to everything, your sandals, your tunic, the broom's bristles, carried in from the palestra and the hills beyond. You think of the sand you swept earlier, its surface now scarred again by the gladiator's march, and how this task mirrors it, a futile effort to impose order on a world of chaos. The barracks must be clean, the floors smooth, for the lanista's morning inspection, his eyes sharp for any flaw that could justify his whip. You've seen him lash a servant for less a stray straw. A smudge of dirt hand you sweep with care, your hands steady despite their ache as you work. You pass Marcus's bunk, his face softened in sleep, though the lines of tension remain, etched by years of survival. You think of his trident, its iron polished by your hands, his belt mended by your stitches, his feet bound by your linen. Each task weaves into his strength, his chance in the arena, yet he'll never know the weight of your labor. The young Retiarius stirs, muttering in his sleep, and you pause, the broom still, until his breathing steadies. His fear is a palpable thing, a reminder of tomorrow's stakes a senator's spectacle, perhaps with a lion, perhaps with a veteran foe. Your broom moves again, gathering the dust, smoothing the stone. The barracks grow cleaner, the piles of debris growing as you sweep toward the door. You pause to gather them, using a scrap of cloth to scoop the dust and straw into a small sack, its hemp coarse against your raw fingers. The lamplight flickers, the oil burning low, and you trim the wick, the flame steadying to cast a clearer light. The gladiators sleep on, their bodies heavy with the day's toll, their dreams, if they dream, haunted by the arena's shadow. You think of your own dreams, faint memories of the Sabine hills, of a life before the ludus, but they slip away, buried under the dust and straw you sweep. The doctor's shadow passes the doorway, his vidus a dark line against the lamplight, and you freeze, the broom poised. He doesn't enter, his footsteps fading toward the palestra, but his presence tightens your chest, a reminder of the lanista's ever-watchful eyes. You finish sweeping the floor, now smooth, the dust cleared, though you know it will return by morning, carried on sandals and breezes. You carry the sack outside, dumping its contents into a pit near the cistern, the dust settling into the earth like a forgotten offering. The ludus is still now, the night deep and quiet, the air heavy with the promise of rain. You return the broom to the kitchen, its bristles dustier than before, and pause for a moment, your hands resting on the table where you sliced the supper bread. The gladiators sleep, the arena waits, and your labors water, sand, blades, leather, stew, dust bind them to tomorrow's fight. The lanista's whip, though coiled for now, remains a specter, its threat woven into every task. As you make your way to the servants' quarters, your straw pallet calling, a quiet question lingers, soft as the dust you swept. What unnoticed speck, what overlooked corner of this floor might draw the lanista's ire when the morning light reveals it? Watching the gladiators depart for the arena, the barracks floors are swept, the dust and straw cleared, leaving the stone smooth under the flickering lamplight. The ludus is cloaked in the deep quiet of night, the air heavy with the scent of rain that never came, now mingled with the faint musk of straw and the lingering warmth of the kitchen's hearth. Your body aches from the day's relentless tasks, grinding barley, sweeping sand, polishing blades, stitching leather, oiling skin, carrying water, serving stew, sweeping again, but exhaustion is a familiar weight, dulled by routine. You've collapsed onto your straw pallet in the servants' quarters, the coarse fibers pricking your skin, and sleep came fitfully, haunted by the looming specter of the games. Now dawn breaks, a thin gray light seeping through the ludus's walls, and your final task before the gladiators depart is no task at all, watching them march out to the arena, their fates tied to your unseen labors. You rise, your muscles stiff, and join the other servants gathering near the palestra, where the gladiators are assembling. The air is cool, tinged with the damp of morning mist, and the sand you swept yesterday is already marked with fresh footprints, the gladiators' boots scuffing the surface as they form ranks. Marcus stands at the head, his trident gleaming faintly in the dawn, his net coiled tightly over his shoulder, his mended belt cinched at his waist. The young Ritiarius is nearby, his arm guard strapped on, his eyes still wide with the fear you saw last night, though his jaw is set, a fragile attempt at resolve. The secutor, the murmillo, the dimicarisol stand ready, their armor polished, their bodies, their feet bound by your hands, their strength fueled by the stew you served. The doctor paces before them, his vitas tapping his thigh, his voice sharp as he barks final instructions. Eyes forward, blades steady. The crowd wants blood. Give them a show, or give them your lives. His words are a whip of their own, driving the gladiators to attention. The lanista stands at the palestra's edge, his whip coiled but ever present, his scarred face unreadable as he surveys his fighters. His temper, volatile yesterday, seems restrained now, focused on the senator's spectacle ahead. But you know better than to trust its calm. A single misstep, a dull blade, a loose binding, a speck of dust could draw his ire, and your back still carries the memory of his lash dot. You stand with the other servants, Gaius, Flavia, the boy with hollow eyes, sure presence unnoticed. Your labor invisible to the gladiators and the lanista alike. The air hums with tension, the weight of the Colosseum's shadow pressing down. You think of your tasks, the sand smoothed for their drills, the trident polished for Marcus's strikes, the leather stitched to hold his belt, the water carried to clean their bodies, the stew served to fuel their strength. Each act, small and uncelebrated, is a thread in the tapestry of their survival. Yet the crowd will never know your name, your hands, your sweat. The gladiators begin to move, their boots crunching against the sand as they march toward the ludus's gates. Marcus leads, his stride steady, his trident a dark silhouette against the rising sun. The young Retiarius follows, his steps hesitant but forced into rhythm by the column's pace. You catch his eye for a moment, and his fear mirrors your own quiet dread of what the arena holds. Rumors of a lion, a veteran secutor, or a senator's cruel whim linger in your thoughts, but you push them aside, your role now only to watch, to bear witness to the men you've prepared. The gates creak open, the iron hinges groaning, and the gladiators pass through, their armor clinking softly, their breaths visible in the cool morning air. Beyond the walls, Rome awakens, the distant rumble of carts, the cries of hawkers, the toll of a temple bell. But here, the ludus feels hollow, its heart marching out to face the Colosseum's roar. You stand with the servants, your hands clasped, the ache of yesterday's buckets and brooms still lingering in your palms. Flavia mutters a prayer under her breath, her words lost to the wind, and Gaius shifts beside you, his eyes fixed on the departing column. The lanista follows the gladiators, his whip swaying at his belt, his gaze forward, already calculating the day's profits or losses. The doctor trails him, his vetus a silent threat, ensuring the men keep formation. You watch Marcus's back, the net swaying slightly with his stride, and you think of the Sabine hills, a distant memory of freedom now buried under the ludus's dust. The young Retiarius stumbles briefly, his bound feet catching on a stone, and your heart lurches. Did you tie his bindings too loosely? But he recovers, his arm guard gleaming faintly in the dawn, as the column disappears beyond the gates. The ludus grows still, the palestra's sand undisturbed, the barracks empty, the bathhouse silent. You and the other servants linger a moment, the weight of the games pressing down, a shared silence that speaks of your unseen role. Your labors, every sweep, every stitch, every drop of water have armed these men, yet their fate lies beyond your reach, in the arena's merciless sand. You turn back to the ludus, the day's tasks already calling more water to haul, more sand to sweep, but the gladiator's departure lingers, a heavy absence as you walk toward the kitchen. The broom, waiting for another round, a quiet question settles in your mind. Soft as the dawn's gray light, what unnoticed flaw in your work sand, blade, leather, or meal might falter when the gladiators face the arena's roar? And whose blood will stain the sand you swept so carefully? Waiting in the ludus for news of the games, the gladiators have vanished beyond the ludus gates, their silhouettes swallowed by the morning mist, the crunch of their boots fading into the clamor of Rome's awakening streets. The palestra lies still, its sand marked by their final steps, a silent testament to the drills you prepared it for. Your body carries the weight of yesterday's labors, grinding barley, sweeping sand, polishing blades, stitching leather, oiling skin, hauling water, serving stew, sweeping again. But now, with the gladiators gone, there's no task to fill the hollow quiet. Your role shifts to waiting, a heavy vigil in the ludus, as the hours stretch toward news of the games. The fate of Marcus, the young Retiarius, and the others tied to the unseen threads of your work. You linger near the kitchen, where Flavia is already scrubbing the hearth, her hands moving with the same dogged rhythm you've come to mirror. The air is cool, the morning mist lingering, carrying the faint scent of damp stone and the distant temps of the Tiber. Gaius is nearby, stacking firewood, his movements slow, his eyes darting toward the gates as if news might arrive with the next breeze. The ludus feels empty, its heart carried away to the Colosseum, where the crowd's roar will decide who lives and who falls. You busy yourself with small tasks, straightening the broom, wiping down the kitchen table, but they're distractions, a way to keep your hands moving while your mind churns. The lanista and the doctor have gone with the gladiators, leaving the ludus under the watch of a lesser overseer, a wiry man named Quintus, whose sharp eyes miss little but lack the lanista's whip-driven menace. He paces the palestra, barking orders to sweep the sand again, though it's already smooth. You take up the broom, its bristles familiar in your raw hands, and move through the motions. The soft scrape, a faint echo of yesterday's work. The sand shifts under your strokes, erasing the gladiator's footprints. But your thoughts are with them, Marcus, with his polished trident, the young Retiarius, with his mended arm guard, their bodies fueled by your stew, their feet bound by your linen. The morning drags, the sun climbing slowly, burning off the mist to reveal a clear sky. You finish sweeping and return to the kitchen, where Flavia hands you a rag to polish the cooking pots, their surfaces blackened from years of fire. The task is mindless, your hands rubbing in circles, the metal gleaming faintly under the cloth. But your ears strain for sound, hooves, shouts, anything that might signal a messenger from the arena. The ludus hums with a tense quiet, the other servants moving through their chores, their faces tight with the same unspoken dread. You think of Marcus, his steady stride, his net swaying as he marched out. You think of the young Retiarius, his nervous eyes, his untested arm guard, facing a veteran's blade or a lion's claws. Rumors from yesterday linger, a senator's whim, a beast in the arena, a spectacle to sat the crowd's hunger for blood. You've heard tales of the Colosseum's roar, the sand stained red, the crowd's cheers turning to gears when a fighter falters. Your labors, every sweep, every stitch, every drop of water, have armed these men. Yet you can't shake the fear that a flaw in your work might betray them. A loose binding, a dull blade, a weak simony could mean death under the arena's merciless sun. You polish the pot harder, the rag catching on a rough edge, your hands trembling slightly with the weight of that thought. Noon passes, the sun high, the ludus baking in its heat. Quintus calls for water, and you fetch a bucket from the cistern, the familiar strain pulling at your shoulders. You pour it into clay cups for the servants, your hands steady, but your mind elsewhere. Gaius joins you, wiping sweat from his brow, and mutters, "They'll send word soon, always do." His voice is gruff, but there's a crack in it, a shared anxiety that binds you. You nod, handing him a cup. the water cool against your raw fingers. The ludus feels like a held breath, its walls closing in as the hours stretch. A shout breaks the quiet, sharp and urgent, from the direction of the gates. Hugh frees, the bucket still in hand, as a boy the one with hollow eyes runs toward Quintus, his voice high with news. "A messenger," he cries, and the servants pause, their tasks forgotten, their eyes turning toward the gates. A lone rider appears, dust rising from his horse's hooves, his tunic stained with sweat. He dismounts, speaking low to Quintus, who listens with a face of stone. You strain to hear, but the words are lost, carried away by the breeze. The servants gather closer, Flavia clutching her rag, Gaius's hands tightening on his axe handle. Quintus turns, his voice cutting through the tension. "The games are done," he says, his tone flat. "Marcus lives. The new Retiarius fell. Others. Mixed fates. Your heart lurches. Marcus, alive, his trident true. Your labors holding fast." But the young Retiarius, his nervous eyes now closed forever, his arm guard useless against the arena's verdict. You think of his trembling hands at supper, his muttered prayers, and a weight settles in your chest, heavy as the buckets you carried. Quintus offers no more, turning back to the messenger, and the servants disperse, their tasks resuming. The ludus's rhythm grinding on, you return to the kitchen, the rag limp in your hand, the pots gleaming but forgotten. Flavia mutters something about the god's whims, her voice low, and Gaius shakes his head, his eyes on the ground. The news of Marcus's survival is a relief, but the young Retiarius's death lingers, a reminder of the arena's cost. Your labors, sand, blades, leather, water, stew held for one but not the other. And you wonder where the fault lies, if it lies with you at all. The day stretches on, more tasks waiting, but the ludus feels changed, the absence of the fallen, a quiet wound, as you take up the broom again, sweeping the palestra's sand for the returning gladiators. A quiet question settles in your mind, soft as the dust under your bristles. What unseen flaw in your work, what overlooked detail in the rush of preparation, might have tipped the scales for the young Retiarius, whose blood now stains the Colosseum's sand? Cleaning the bloodied gear of the survivors, the news of the games hangs heavy in the ludus, a weight that lingers in the air as the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the palestra. Marcus lives, but the young Retiarius is gone, his blood staining the Colosseum's sand, his nervous eyes closed forever. The other gladiators' fates remain a vague blur. Quintus's mixed fates, offering little clarity. The ludus hums with the slow return of its rhythm, servants resuming their tasks. But the absence of the fallen is a quiet wound, felt in the glances shared between you, Flavia, and Gaius, your hands. Still raw from yesterday's labors, sweeping, polishing, stitching, hauling, serving, find no rest. The surviving gladiators will return soon, their gear bloodied and battered, and your task is to clean it, restoring their tools of survival for the next fight. You make your way to the armory, where the air is thick with the familiar scent of iron and leather, now tinged with the faint must of damp stone from the morning's mist. The racks stand ready, half empty since the gladiators took their weapons to the arena. You gather a clay basin, a rag stiff with old oil, and a small jar of vinegar, its sharp temps cutting through the armory's metallic haze. The vinegar will loosen blood and grime, a necessity for cleaning the gear that returns from the Colosseum's violence. You set the basin on the wooden table, its surface scarred from years of such work, and wait. The silence heavy with the anticipation of the gladiators' return. The gates creak open, their iron hinges groaning, and the surviving gladiators trudge back into the ludus, their steps heavy, their armor clinking softly. Marcus is among them, his trident still in hand, its prongs dulled with dried blood, his net torn in places, his face etched with exhaustion, but alive. The secutor follows, his shield dented, his helmet streaked with red. The murmillo is there too, his distant eyes now shadowed with something darker, his gladius chipped at the edge. The absence of the young retiarius is stark, a gap in the column that tightens your chest. The lanista trails them, his whip coiled, his expression unreadable but sharp, already calculating the cost of victory and loss. The doctor barks orders, directing the gladiators to the bathhouse, their gear left in a pile near the armory door. You begin with Marcus's trident, its iron heavy in your hands, the blood crusted along its prongs, a grim testament to the arena's toll. You dip the rag in vinegar, its acrid scent stinging your nose, and scrub gently, the blood loosening into dark streaks that drip into the basin. The iron gleams faintly as you work, the polished surface you tended yesterday re-emerging, though scarred with new scratches. You think of Marcus, his steady stride, his survival, a fragile thread you helped Weaveson smoothed, blades polished, leather stitched, body oiled, belly fed. But the young Retiarius's fate gnaws at you, his arm guard now useless, perhaps lying in the arena's sand or claimed as a trophy by the crowd. The net is next, its hemp fibers torn and stained, the knots frayed from a secutor's blade or a desperate grapple. You rinse it in the basin, the water turning murky, and pick at the knots with your fingers, trying to salvage what you can. The work is slow, the vinegar soaking into your raw skin, stinging the cuts from yesterday's needle and broom. You glance at the other gear shields, helmets, belts all marked with blood and dirt, each piece a story of survival or failure. Gaius joins you, his hands steady as he scrubs a secutor's shield, the metal-dented butthole. Marcus fought well, he mutters, his voice low. The boy, too green, never had a chance. You nod, the words settling like dust, your hands moving faster to drown the thought. The armory fills with the soft sounds of cleaning, the splash of vinegar, the scrape of rags, the occasional clank of metal as a gladius is set aside. The air grows heavy, the vinegar's sharpness blending with the iron's temps, a reminder of the arena's cost. You move to the murmillo's gladius, its edge chipped, the blood dried in thin lines along the blade. The vinegar loosens it, the rag turning red as you scrub, the iron warming under your touch. You wonder whose blood this is, opponent, beast, or the murmillo's own end, whether your polished blades held true. The lanista's shadow looms, his earlier temper now a quiet threat, his eyes sure to inspect this gear for any flaw. Flavia appears at the armory door, her hands red from scrubbing pots, her face drawn. Quintus says the senator was pleased, she says, her voice flat. More games soon, the words are a weight, another cycle of labor and loss looming. You nod, focusing on the gladius, the rag moving in tight circles, the blood flaking away. The surviving gladiators are in the bathhouse now, their bodies being oiled again, their wounds tended by the medicus. Your work cleaning their gear ensures they'll fight again. Their survival, a fragile chain you help forge. Though the young Retiarius's absence is a broken link as you finish the gladius, setting it back on the rack. You glance at Marcus's trident, now clean but scarred, its prongs ready for another day. The net lies mended, its knots retied, though weaker than before. The armory grows quiet, the pile of gear dwindling as you and Gaius work, the vinegar basin nearly empty. The ludus settles into evening, the sun low, the air cooling with the promise of night. You think of the young Retiarius, his trembling hands at supper, his arm guard stitched by your needle, now lost to the arena's sand. Marcus lives, but at what cost, and for how long? As you wipe your hands, the vinegar stinging your raw skin, you step outside, the ludus bathed in the last light of day. The palestra's sand lies smooth, waiting for tomorrow's drills, but the weight of the games lingers, a shadow over the stone walls. Your labors, sand, blades, leather, water, stew. Now blood bind you to the gladiator's fate, yet their victories and losses are not yours. As you turn back to the armory, ready to stack the cleaned gear, a quiet question settles in your mind, soft as the blood-flecked rag in your hand. What unseen nick, what overlooked stain in this gear might falter when the gladiators face the arena's roar again?